The boy charged at him with everything he had, with no intention of holding back just because Oscar was unarmed. Oscar observed him carefully, watching every movement of ki-based body reinforcement, but knew it wasn't enough and effortlessly dodged the strike, saying, "You need to treat the sword as an extension of your own body, not just as a weapon." The boy clenched his teeth in fury, and in desperation began swinging his sword non-stop, but not a single attack even brushed Oscar. "Don't you dare look down on me! Damn it!" he shouted, enraged. Yet the protagonist moved just as fast as the blade trying to hit him. "I ended up falling back into the habits of how I used to train with my disciple." Suddenly, the youth leapt forward, gripping his sword tightly and shouted, "But how? Why can't I hit you?" Oscar adjusted his stance and landed a powerful hook to his opponent's face, knocking him down and disarming him in the same instant. Furious, the boy shouted, "You!" But before he could finish the sentence, another punch flew toward him, accompanied by a cold voice. "Why waste your reach against an unarmed opponent?" Oscar said, fury burning in his eyes. Soon after, the boy's friends awkwardly restrained him and began dragging him away. Oscar merely sighed, glanced at the sword embedded in the ground, and thought, that should keep him out of my way for a while. Clenching his fists, he remembered that in his past life, his father had forced sword ki during the awakening. Determined not to repeat the same mistake, this time he decided to obtain mana. First, Oscar continued walking along the flower-lined path. He was quite tired, but he didn't want anyone else around, so he moved as far away as possible. Before a large rock, he stopped and recalled a conversation he had once had with a mage. At the time, he had asked how magic worked. He explained that swordsmen refined the spirit within their own bodies to strengthen flesh and weapons, but he was curious about how mages did it. The woman found the question interesting, but couldn't explain it right away until she noticed a bucket and a watering can nearby. Picking them up, she smiled and said, "For us, magic is very much like using a watering can to water plants." It sounded absurd at first, but she continued, "You just can't see it, but mana is all around us. It exists naturally and fills the very atmosphere. When that mana circulates through your circuits and is poured into a magical formula, magic is activated." Now in the present, Oscar sat atop the large rock, remaining calm and focused. That mage said mana fills the atmosphere. If I can perceive it, then I should be able to draw it into my circuits. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes, recalling how swordsmen used sight, hearing, and even their skin to survive countless dangerous encounters, pushing the five senses to their absolute limits. Even though he was no longer a swordsman, the refined senses of a sword saint were still etched into his body, and he believed that with them he would be able to sense mana even if it was invisible. With his eyes closed, he began to perceive the movement of water, the bird song, the fish swimming, and even the bubbles rising from the depths, which started to glow like tiny points of light. He slowly opened his eyes and suddenly saw intense energy circulating around him, like luminous streams. "This is mana! I did it!" His eyes filled with awe, and excitement quickly followed. "Now all that's left is to pull the mana into my circuits. But how am I going to do that?" As he reflected, he felt something strange. He leapt down from the rock and stared toward the depths of the flowered path, noticing flashes of light entering the area. "This is strange. I don't sense any living beings." Even so, he advanced cautiously, following that sensation. Suddenly, he slipped down a muddy embankment and fell to the ground. Turning his head, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. A massive stone being stood right in front of him. "Is that a golem?" he murmured to himself. "What is something like that doing here?" All at once, a shadow appeared above him. Leaves fell even more heavily as a woman descended, landing on the shoulders of the stone giant. The golem's eyes glowed as if responding to her command. The woman then asked, "What business do you have in my workshop? Did you come to steal my research?" Oscar stared at her, everything feeling surreal. She continued in a threatening tone, "If you value your life, you'd better think very carefully before opening your mouth." Cap 04. By that point, Oscar had already heard countless stories about that woman across many battlefields. They said she had turned the relentless northern region into a land of intense cold and perpetual snow. War was her main stage, commanding a golem with strength equal to that of 1,000 soldiers. That woman had been a heroine who stood firm against endless hordes of monsters. She was the life-forging mage, Isabel. Oscar was kneeling before her, completely immobilized, and never imagined he would encounter her again in this life. With authority, she spoke, "Now answer me. Which faction of mages do you belong to?" Or else, the sharp tip of her staff struck the ground with force, causing a loud boom and making a red circle appear beneath Oscar. He replied quickly, "Wait, please! I didn't resist when I was captured earlier. I'm not your enemy." Isabel rose, furious, pointing her staff at him as all of her energy manifested. It seems you wish for your own end. Farewell, nameless mage. Oscar closed his eyes, clenched his teeth, and trembled, feeling the weight of that moment. Then, gathering his courage, he shouted, "First of all, I'm not even a mage yet." That caught her off guard. What a pathetic excuse. She placed her hand on his head, and in that same instant her eyes widened when she realized there was no mana flowing through his circuits. Sometime later, Oscar was free, sitting at Isabel's invitation as she served him a cup of tea. "Now I understand your situation, but let me make one thing very clear. I have no intention of apologizing. I've just accepted a position as a professor at the academy, and even so, everyone there already treats me like a public enemy." Oscar was surprised to learn that she would be working at the Magic Academy, but soon responded calmly. Isabel believed that the teaching position would be useful for her golem research. Oscar, on the other hand, could only think that this was his chance. If he could study under her guidance, perhaps he could finally integrate mana into his circuits. That was when he pleaded, "Lady Isabel, I beg you, please teach me how to infuse mana into my body." The answer came immediately and bluntly. "I have no interest in weak and incompetent men. If you understand, finish your tea and leave." At that moment, Oscar remembered his end in his past life and knew he couldn't accept that. He couldn't give up so easily. His gaze sharpened as he thought about it, watching her refill the teacups with the help of an auxiliary golem. That was when he noticed something strange and stood up at once, stating that there was something wrong with the golem. "What is it now? If you're talking nonsense just to get my attention," she said impatiently, but was interrupted when the golem struck her, spilling all the tea over her. Oscar rushed over in concern, asking if she had been burned, and handed her a cloth so she could dry herself. Soaked, she stared at the golem and noticed an obvious defect in the mana circuits near its shoulder. Then she turned back to Oscar and asked in surprise, "How did you know the golem was malfunctioning?" Confused, Oscar replied, "I just noticed that the flow of mana seemed abnormal." She was astonished to realize that he could truly see the mana around him. Oscar recalled what a mage had once said, that the flow of mana was invisible to the ordinary eye, but nodded in confirmation. As she dried, herself, Isabel commented, "That explains how you managed to pass through my barrier. My defensive spells work by manipulating the invisible mana present in the air." Oscar, however, was certain that this stemmed from his experience as a swordsman, and as he remembered that, he questioned himself in silence. Is this the talent that man was talking about? Isabel interrupted his thoughts, asking his name and stating that she would teach him how to use mana. "Are you sure? But before that," he said, still confused. She replied at once, "It remains true that I have no interest in weak and incompetent men. However, you've just piqued my interest." She extended her hand with a faint smile, and the two shook hands, sealing an agreement. Then Isabel led him to a blackboard and explained, "You're starting from a misconception. While you're alive, mana is naturally absorbed by the body." Oscar was surprised, but still didn't understand how to capture it and make it flow. She continued, "You can't pour tea without a cup, can you? Mana only flows through circuits when there's a magical formula to receive it." She then showed him a sheet of paper and added, "Magic paper inscribed with a specific spell. It's a standard item given to all new academy students." Curious, Oscar asked what kind of spell it was, but she said it was a surprise and would only reveal it after he succeeded. Visualize the power circulating within your body, then imagine pouring that power into the magical formula. Do you think you can do it? Excited, Oscar said he would give it his best. Isabel remained silent, watching his enthusiasm. She knew it sounded simple, but in practice it was a process that would take at least a full month, even at an accelerated pace. Still, if Oscar's talent was real, perhaps he could manage it in 15 days. Without wasting time, Oscar placed the paper with the magic circle on the ground, pointed his hands toward it, and repeated to himself, "Feel the power circulating through my body. That's it. Just like when I refine sword chi. I just need to direct my consciousness inward." He focused, closed his eyes, and felt as if his mind detached, observing only his own body. He managed to perceive all his energy points, and suddenly felt something flow. It's true. The mana was here all along. Capurify. Mastering magic is like learning to walk with a new pair of legs. No human can walk from the moment they are born. You fall again and again, learn how to use your own body, until you finally manage to stand. And that was exactly what impressed Isabel the most. It was said that those who reached the pinnacle of the magical world mastered mana quickly, but she could not believe what she was seeing. Oscar was standing there, looking upward, watching his mana flow like fireworks. To think he mastered mana in a single attempt. The professor tried to recall the moment when he noticed something wrong with the golem and then smiled genuinely. He can see the mana in the atmosphere? No, that alone doesn't explain everything. Whatever the reason, one thing is certain, he's the real. Oscar was enchanted by what he had just accomplished and soon asked whether that could already be considered magic. Isabel immediately called out to him, patting him on the back several times. This is incredible! To think you activated the magical formula on your very first try. There has never been anyone like this in history. However, Oscar felt that it wasn't enough, nor was it beautiful. He clenched his teeth, recalling the magic he had seen when he was younger, the sense of wonder it had stirred within him. Looking at his own hands, he said, "To me, magic is something beautiful and special, but this magic is different." Isabel didn't understand right away, but Oscar pointed to the formula on the paper and continued, "This part of the formula here, just like with the golem, the mana flow felt strange." He turned to the professor and asked what she thought. At that moment, Isabel was taken aback and couldn't answer. Even so, Oscar went on, "I realized something. I don't just want to become a mage. I want to use perfect, beautiful magic." Isabel's eyes widened as she replied, "Well, if there's any part of the formula that bothers you, you can simply rewrite it." Oscar stood up immediately, asking how he could possibly do such a thing. He stepped forward with conviction, getting so close that Isabel became completely flustered. Elsewhere, Oscar's father walked through the corridors, overhearing various conversations. A group of students defeated by Oscar had gathered, with one of them still unconscious. "I can't believe that guy got so strong," one said, while another tried to change the subject. Suddenly, Oscar's father approached and asked what had happened, startling the students. They tried to explain, stammering, "It wasn't something we did." Losing his patience, the man asked again, "The truth is that," and then the whole story was told. As he listened, Oscar's father grew increasingly shocked, unable to believe it. "To think Oscar managed to defeat you in that state." He turned his back on the students and concluded, "Make sure he receives proper treatment and is fully recovered by tomorrow, so there are no lingering effects." Oscar's father walked on thoughtfully, eyes fixed on the path ahead, unable to hide the broad smile on his face. It was the smile of a proud father. "It seems the timing is right. Is it already time to grant that boy sword chi?" Meanwhile, Oscar was immersed in Isabel's study, surrounded by books. "I had no idea magical formulas were this deep." Isabel laughed, finding that completely natural. To use magic, instinct alone wasn't enough. Knowledge was necessary, though Oscar's instincts were surprisingly good. Excited, she pointed to a corner filled with even more books and said, "If you want to learn more, I can lend you my books." Isabel boasted that all the knowledge she needed was already in her head, so he could take as many books as he liked. However, when she looked up, she realized Oscar was no longer there. When she turned around, she saw Oscar sorting through numerous books and stacking them, declaring that he would take all of them. You're planning to take all of that home?" Oscar simply recalled her words. "But you said as many as I wanted." That enthusiasm was something that impressed any teacher, but Isabel knew she had to warn him. "That's true. I hate to dampen your excitement, but I need to give you a warning. At this moment, you are already a mage with mana settled in your circuits. Be very careful with sword chi." It was a legitimate concern because even as his father swelled with pride over his son's growth, this situation could end up putting Oscar's life at risk.